Imagine, just for a moment, that the center of global power is no longer quietly shifting in the corridors of Washington, London, or Brussels. Instead, picture the tectonic plates of influence grinding and jolting in the bustling metropolises of Shanghai, Mumbai, São Paulo, Moscow, and Johannesburg. What if, right now, the balance of power is tipping away from familiar hands, not slowly, but with a speed and force that is reshaping the world before our very eyes? Beneath the surface of the global economy, the change is not subtle, it is seismic. The world order, for centuries dominated by Western institutions and philosophies, is being fundamentally challenged by a new and assertive coalition: Brics. This group, originally conceived as a mere economic curiosity, has rapidly transformed into a hands-on powerhouse. Today, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa form the beating heart of an alternative vision for global development, a vision that is actively redrawing the boundaries of international finance and politics. Let us consider how quickly these changes have unfolded. Just 2 decades ago, the idea of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa coordinating on the world stage seemed fanciful to most Western policymakers. The term BRIC itself was coined by a British economist, Jim O'Neill, as a way to describe promising investment destinations rather than a cohesive alliance. Yet within a few short years, these nations began meeting regularly, exchanging ideas, and building trust. Today, the BRICS Forum is not only real, it is a living, evolving organism with its own bank, agenda, and expanding sphere of influence. The energy crisis that gripped Europe in recent years has been more than a wake-up call. It has been a shattering of long-held illusions. For decades, Europeans believed that access to affordable, reliable energy was a given, a birthright guaranteed by geography and diplomacy. But as energy costs soared and supply chains buckled, the continent's entire economic model came under threat. Factories in Germany, once the engine room of Europe, have idled production lines. British households, used to moderate utility bills, have faced the prospect of choosing between heating and eating. The old rules, those that shielded Europe from the chaos of energy insecurity, are dissolving at a pace that few could have predicted. This crisis did not occur in isolation. It exposed the brittle nature of the systems that underpinned Western prosperity. The sudden spike in natural gas prices, for example, was not just a function of market volatility. It was the result of deep geopolitical rifts, shifting alliances, and a global scramble for resources that is still playing out. The cracks in Europe's energy security have revealed vulnerabilities that cannot be patched with quick fixes or temporary subsidies. Meanwhile, Russia has executed one of the fastest strategic pivots in modern history. Confronted by sanctions and diplomatic isolation from the West, Moscow turned eastward, forging new alliances with China, India, and a host of emerging powers. In a matter of months, decades of orientation toward European markets were reoriented toward Asia and the global South. This redirection was not merely symbolic. It involved the construction of new pipelines, the renegotiation of trade agreements, and the creation of alternative financial channels. The swift reconfiguration of Russia's economic ties offers a case study in how quickly the rules of global engagement can change. We are witnessing the rewriting of the global rulebook in real time. Alliances and decisions that once spanned generations are now forged in mere months, sometimes even weeks. Across every continent, nations are discarding rigid ideological frameworks in favor of pragmatic, interest-driven deals. They are racing to secure energy, technology, and investment before the dust from this global reshuffling settles. For you, the stakes could not be more personal. Missing these historic shifts does not just mean lost economic opportunities. It means risking your job, your investments, and even your nation's independence. The rise of new global hubs and the collapse of old certainties are not theoretical. They will touch every aspect of your life, from the price of your groceries to the security of your digital data. So let us pull back the curtain and examine what is happening behind the headlines. Because a new world order is taking shape. Faster and more unpredictably, than anyone in the old centers of power ever imagined. To truly grasp what is at stake, we must trace the evolution of Brics from a loose idea into a force that is actively reshaping the world. Let us journey back to the origins and ambitions behind this seismic shift. In the early 2000s, the world was still basking in the glow of globalization. Western-led institutions like the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank set the terms for development. The United States dollar was the unquestioned currency of international trade. Yet beneath the surface, discontent simmered. Emerging economies bristled at what they saw as a system stacked against them, one that imposed political conditions and prioritized the interests of wealthy nations over the needs of the many. The first BRIC summit, held in Yekaterinburg, Russia, in 2009, was a modest affair. Leaders exchanged pleasantries and issued joint statements, but few believed the grouping would amount to much. Fast forward to today, and the picture could not be more different. BRICS nations collectively generate nearly one-third of the world's GDP, a staggering figure that highlights their growing economic heft. Even more striking, they represent over 2/5 of humanity, with populations that dwarf those of any Western bloc. But the true story of BRICS is not just about scale. It is about momentum and intent. The group is moving from dialogue to action, from aspiration to institution building. No longer content with being a forum for emerging economies, BRICS is constructing the architecture of a true alternative system, one that is based on sovereignty, equality, and mutual strategic self-interest. Every member, regardless of its size or economic weight, has an equal voice and a genuine stake in setting the bloc's direction. Consider the example of the New Development Bank, NDB, established by BRICS in 2015. Unlike Western-led institutions, the NDB provides development funding without imposing political strings. It has already financed major projects, from renewable energy in Brazil to transportation infrastructure in South Africa. In India, the bank supported the construction of hundreds of kilometers of rural roads, giving isolated communities access to markets and services. In China, it co-financed green energy initiatives that directly contributed to the country's rapid expansion of solar and wind capacity. Crucially, these investments increasingly rely on national currencies, not the United States dollar. This is not just a nod to symbolism, it is a deliberate, strategic push to build a more balanced, multipolar financial system. By settling loans and contracts in local money, BRICS countries reduce their vulnerability to currency shocks and sanctions. This move toward de-dollarization is challenging the financial architecture that has underpinned Western dominance for decades. Interest from outsiders is surging. In recent years, countries such as Turkey, Egypt, and Saudi Arabia have actively sought membership in BRICS. Their applications are not mere diplomatic gestures. They are calculated moves by regional powers to safeguard their independence and amplify their leverage in a world where old alliances are fraying. Saudi Arabia, for example, brings with it vast oil wealth and control over global energy markets. Egypt controls the Suez Canal, a lifeline for East-West trade. Turkey straddles both Europe and Asia, commanding industrial clout and strategic access to the Black Sea. Imagine a BRICS bloc expanded to include these nations. Together, they could command nearly one-half of the world's economic output and dominate crucial trade corridors and resource flows. The implications would be staggering. A single bloc directing energy supplies, shaping trade policy, and representing a massive share of global population. This is not just an economic contest. It is a fundamental reordering of who writes the rules for the 21st century. But perhaps the most profound shift is philosophical. BRICS insists on decision-making by consensus and respect for national sovereignty. This stands in sharp contrast to Western institutions like the International Monetary Fund, which often require borrowers to implement structural reforms, privatize state assets, or accept austerity as a condition for aid. For many developing countries, the BRICS model offers a more respectful and pragmatic path to development, a partnership rather than a hierarchy. Let us look at a concrete scenario. During the COVID-19 pandemic, Western lenders frequently tied emergency support to fiscal austerity, forcing some nations to slash health budgets just when they needed them most. Brics, by contrast, provided lines of credit and technical assistance without such strings, allowing countries to respond more flexibly to the crisis. As Brics forges ahead with its new approach, Europe is confronting its own moment of reckoning. The effort to substitute Russian energy with other sources has fallen short. Gas prices have soared, forcing factories in places like Germany and Italy to reduce output or close altogether. Inflation is eroding household incomes, and companies are struggling to remain competitive on the world stage. Below the surface, the European Union's much-vaunted unity is starting to fracture. Some countries, like Hungary and Bulgaria, are quietly renegotiating energy deals to secure their own survival, even as Brussels pushes for a common front. Others, such as Latvia and Lithuania, are absorbing the pain of strict political choices, cutting themselves off from Russian supplies and facing the economic consequences. The divergence between national priorities and continental strategies is becoming increasingly apparent. This is not the first time Europe has faced such challenges. In the 1970s, during the oil shocks, European nations scrambled to adapt to soaring energy prices and supply disruptions. But today's crisis is different in scale and complexity. The interconnectedness of the global economy means that disruptions in one region ripple quickly across the world, affecting everything from food prices in Africa to manufacturing costs in Asia. At stake is the very model that will define the future. Will it be pragmatic cooperation rooted in sovereignty and mutual benefit, or a rigid framework built on ideology and dependence? The outcome will shape not just economies, but the distribution of power and the daily lives of billions. With the world's fault lines now exposed, the question is no longer whether change is coming, but how these seismic shifts will transform the global landscape in the years ahead. As the balance of power tilts, both challenges and opportunities emerge for those prepared to adapt. For the unprepared, the consequences could be severe: lost markets, diminished influence, and decades of stagnation. We are witnessing the dawn of irreversible global change. The center of economic gravity is moving steadily east and south, and the cracks in the old system are widening. If Brics expands as planned, the bloc could represent nearly half of the world's total economic output. The likely addition of major regional players would mark the transformation of Brics from an alliance into an engine of global growth. But the real revolution is structural. The financial architecture itself is being redesigned from the ground up. The new development bank now offers nations a way to finance growth without relying on the United States dollar. This drive toward de-dollarization threatens to strip Western powers of their traditional financial leverage, especially over the global South. Countries that previously had little choice but to turn to the International Monetary Fund or World Bank for support now have genuine alternatives. Some nations are already capitalizing on this new reality. Russia, faced with Western sanctions, has redirected its trade and investment toward Asia and emerging markets. By rapidly building new supply routes and deepening ties with China and India, Russia has stabilized its economy and provided a blueprint for how countries can adapt to seismic global changes. For instance, in 2022, Russia's exports to China surged to record highs, while joint infrastructure projects, such as cross-border bridges and energy pipelines, proceeded at unprecedented speed. Elsewhere, self-sufficient supply chains and new technological alliances are forming far from the traditional Western orbit. India, for example, has ramped up its domestic production of pharmaceuticals and electronics, reducing reliance on imports from both the United States and China. In Brazil, the development of homegrown agricultural technologies has helped shield its economy from global food price shocks. These networks are blunting the impact of sanctions, pressure campaigns, and financial blackmail. The era when a single bloc could dictate the rules of the global game is fading fast. For the first time, the Global South is finding its voice within international institutions. Through Brics, developing countries are gaining real power to shape the rules of trade, investment, and development, on their own terms, not just those set in Washington or Brussels. Consider the example of vaccine diplomacy during the pandemic. While Western countries hoarded doses for themselves, Brics nations coordinated shipments to Africa and Latin America, winning influence and goodwill. Europe now faces a stark crossroads. Its reluctance to adapt to the new economic and energy reality could sideline it from the flows of future prosperity. Without bold, innovative change, Europe risks standing on the periphery while new centers of influence rise elsewhere. The stakes could not be higher. Entire regions stand to gain, or lose, decades of prosperity and strategic relevance. The choices made now will decide the world's next winners and losers. But how did this seismic shift happen so quickly, and what underlying forces are propelling it forward? To understand, we must trace the roots of Brics' rise and the deeper currents reshaping global power. Every crisis cracks open a door, if you recognize it and act fast enough. The global economic order is not just shifting, it is being rewritten in real time. The victors will not be those who cling to the past, but those who move quickly, form pragmatic coalitions, and adapt with open eyes. The era of gradual consensus-driven change has ended. Today, speed, adaptability, and shrewd alliances are the core currencies of power. For nations, survival now means weaving resilience into every layer of their economies. Relying on a single supplier, market, or currency is no longer an advantage. It is a dangerous liability. Countries that diversify their partnerships, reinforce supply chains, and secure financial autonomy are the ones best placed to flourish in this emerging multipolar world. Let us look at practical steps some nations are taking. India has signed free trade agreements with Australia and the United Arab Emirates, broadening access to energy, raw materials, and markets. Brazil is investing in digital infrastructure to enhance its competitiveness and connect its rural heartland to global commerce. South Africa is building new ports and transport links to become a gateway for African trade. New centers of economic gravity are rising, bound more by mutual gain than by rigid ideology. It is wishful thinking to believe the world will simply snap back to old rules. Instead, those who act decisively, who do not wait for perfect clarity, will shape the coming order. During the Asian financial crisis of the late 1990s, countries that quickly adopted capital controls and diversified trade partners rebounded faster than those that hesitated. The lesson is clear. In times of upheaval, speed and adaptability win. Businesses face a similar lesson. Flexibility is no longer a bonus, it is a necessity. Companies must build alliances beyond traditional boundaries. They must rethink the origins and destinations of their goods, their talent, and their capital. The ability to pivot, to create alternate routes and partnerships, is now essential for survival. For example, Japanese car manufacturers have diversified their supply chains by sourcing components from Southeast Asia, Latin America, and even Africa, reducing exposure to single-country risks. On a personal level, understanding these shifts can transform your career, investments, and even your choice of where to live or start a business. The skills that matter most now are not fixed expertise, but adaptability, cultural fluency, and a knack for collaboration across borders and industries. In the 1980s, language skills and international experience were niche assets. Today, they are prerequisites for success in a globalized, multipolar world. The era of one-size-fits-all globalization is over. Power and agency flow to those who practice flexible, multipolar cooperation. Relying on old assumptions puts you at risk, nationally, corporately, and personally. Your economic security and future prospects now depend on your willingness to adapt. The stakes are immense. Failing to adjust means surrendering influence and security, not just for nations or companies, but for everyone within these systems. The forces remaking the world do not wait for anyone. Only those who match their pace will have a shot at prosperity. But what does this new order look like in practice? To understand its impact, let us examine concrete examples of how the rules of global power are already changing. Consider the Belt and Road Initiative, China's vast infrastructure program spanning more than 70 countries. By financing ports, railways, and highways across Asia, Africa, and Europe, China is not only building trade routes, but also forging new diplomatic ties. In Kenya, a Chinese-built railway connects the capital, Nairobi, to the port city of Mombasa, slashing travel times and boosting trade. In Pakistan, the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor is transforming remote regions into economic hubs, creating jobs and lifting millions out of poverty. In Latin America, Brazil has partnered with other Brics nations to develop a regional payment system that bypasses the United States dollar, lowering transaction costs and insulating economies from external shocks. This initiative, called the Brics Pay System, allows cross-border payments in local currencies and is already being adopted by several smaller economies eager to reduce their reliance on Western banks. These are not isolated cases. Across the globe, alternative models of cooperation are gaining ground. In Southeast Asia, the Association of Southeast Asian Nations, ASEAN, has built a network of free trade agreements that link its members to China, Japan, South Korea, and Australia. These agreements have helped the region weather global downturns and attract investment, even as traditional powers struggle. Historical parallels abound. In the aftermath of World War II, the United States used the Marshall Plan to rebuild Europe, creating a web of economic and security ties that shaped the order for more than half a century. Today, the BRICS coalition and its partners are pursuing their own version of this strategy, investing in infrastructure, fostering regional integration, and offering alternatives to the Western-led system. What practical steps can individuals and businesses take to thrive in this new environment? First, stay informed. Follow developments in emerging markets, track new trade agreements, and understand how changes in the global energy landscape can affect your industry or investments. Second, build relationships across borders. Whether you are a startup founder, an engineer, or a policy analyst, international networks are more valuable than ever. Third, cultivate adaptability. Be ready to pivot your business model, learn new skills, and embrace cross-cultural collaboration. For governments, the path forward is equally clear. Invest in education and digital literacy to equip citizens for the jobs of tomorrow. Foster innovation by supporting research and development, especially in sectors like renewable energy, biotechnology, and artificial intelligence. Build resilient infrastructure that can withstand shocks and connect your economy to global networks. The rules are being rewritten now. The old order is fading, replaced by a new economic reality forged by bold, pragmatic alliances. Today's decisions, by governments, businesses, and individuals, will decide who prospers in this emerging landscape and who is left scrambling to keep up. BRICS, once just a loose association, has transformed into a powerful force. Its dramatic expansion and growing institutional strength are disrupting the long-standing dominance of Western powers. This is not merely about shifting allegiances. It is about building new financial systems, energy grids, and trade corridors where sovereignty and practical cooperation matter more than old ideologies. The stakes are monumental. Every nation, every company, every person will feel the impact of these changes, whether through new jobs, scarce resources, or the promise of lasting prosperity. Will you anticipate where money and influence will flow next and help shape this future? Or will you watch from the sidelines as others decide your destiny? This is not a gradual shift. It is a real-time revolution. The tectonic plates of global finance and power are moving, faster than ever before. Those who act with vision and courage can secure a place in the new world order. The alternative is stark: adapt or risk being left behind. Ask yourself, where do you stand? The world is watching, and the window to make history may never open again. The curtain is rising on a new era. Will you play your part, or let the moment pass you by?